Ready to go, Aaron? Hey, everybody. How you doing? This is Candid Frank Live Leaf Talk with Aaron, William, Freeland, and myself, Candid. Well, Aaron, so here it is. The Leafs were in first there for a wee bit, but last night, Florida played its second game that it's played more than Toronto and used that second extra game to take a point lead over the Leafs.
It's been a real seesaw battle at the top for sure. 2 games in hand, though. I know that the Leafs are actually showing a higher win percentage at .638 than they are. However, you know, the way Bettman figures everything out, you know, it's going to look a little wonky. But they hopped over thanks to a win over the Oilers. You know, it wasn't looking that good for the Leafs on Tuesday, was it?
Not out of the gate, it didn't. And a team that they needed to do to them what over the years they've done to the Leafs, which eventually they did. And of course, the victory come from behind. I guess it was 2-0. No, it was 3-0.
3-0, yeah.
3-0. And then it was tied, and then the Leafs took a lead temporarily, right, to 4-3, and then the Bruins tied it, and then they went into overtime. No, wait a minute, Bruins went ahead, and it
4-3.
was
Yeah,
the 6-5 was the final score. Sorry, I'm really going by memory. I should have that stuff in front of me.
It's not a problem. I was
using my memory. So basically, I guess the long and short of it is that Toronto had a bad start in that game, but did enough to recover. And I think that the part that's most important in this conversation is that the guys that did it weren't the big guns until the very end.
No, and you know, when Pontus Holmberg scores the goal to tie it up with 46 seconds left at 4 before you head off to overtime, it kind of has to make you wonder. It was a really hard fought game for the most part. The Leafs did come out flat. They didn't look like they had any get up and go to them whatsoever. You know, being down 2-0 after the first, 3-0 partway through the second before finally getting on the board. You know, but that 3-goal third period was absolutely huge for them. And you know, when you have guys like Nicky Bobby scored, which was absolutely fantastic. Pontus Holmberg had the tying goal. Mitch Marner had a power play goal, which is good because that gets their power play a little bit more back on track. It had been a while since he managed to do that. And Morgan Riley, for as much as we may have been hard on him, finally got his 7th goal of the season at 13:52 of the second period to at least break the goose egg. Now, he's not out of the woods yet, as far as I'm concerned.
And a lot of points in that game.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, he had an assist on Marner's power play goal, had an assist on Nick Robertson's goal, you know, had an assist on the overtime goal, which was also assisted off Austin Matthews. So at the end of the day, he had a really big game for the Leafs. But again, not out of the woods yet, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to, you know, earning his contract and getting out of my doghouse.
I think, you know, I don't need to mention it. I'd lost faith, not in him, but I'd lost the belief that at the time, at that moment, he wasn't playing the kind of hockey that we're accustomed to. You know, people get those kinds of moments, and we discussed the fact that it's quite possible that, you know, the marriage, the child, all these things are a distraction, right? A distraction that is hard to overcome. Now, hopefully this is a sign that he's been able to adjust to being a husband and a father. And you know, we know that there's no doubt that that's an important function in a hockey player's life, his family. It's so much so that teams in the National Hockey League, I won't talk about other sports, but I'll talk about hockey specifically, where there are concessions made by ownership, by general managers, by coaches, conceding the fact that these are human beings and they have life experiences that, like delivering a baby, that is more important than a hockey game. In their minds, like it's in the organization's mind that it's more important that this player be there for that moment and time, right? Funerals, things like that, good and bad things that allow room for players to do that. So obviously there's a concession to the fact that outside of hockey has a direct impact on what happens on the ice. And I think we both agree, but we both don't know. We can't say for sure that basically the emotional challenge of being a new husband and father, maybe he's coming out the other side. This game may show that the Leafs have Morgan Rielly, the 1 or 1A defenseman that they thought they had when they signed him to that lucrative deal.
No, it's good for him to be seeing his way through this. And again, like you mentioned, I don't necessarily think he's out of the woods himself, but there is at least a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not necessarily a train wreck. It's
now would be a good time for him to play like a 1. Right now would be a really good time.
No, it really would. And the Bruins collapsing again, as they did, seems reminiscent of the Maple Leafs collapses when it came to the playoffs. The good news out of all of this, at least as far as
a 3-goal lead.
Yeah. The way that I see it, though, with the Bruins sitting where they are, 4 points out of a wild card spot currently, which are occupied by Detroit and Columbus. There's one of those things that we may not necessarily have to face in the playoffs. So I know Brad Marchand has been positive about the whole ordeal, and he's saying, well, there's still a ways to go, but we can always run it back next year and tinker and tweak and do what we need to do. But with only 22 games left in the season now, the window is getting smaller and smaller for them to eat their way in.
Well, the two, him and Pasta are basically the guys that need to carry this team. And then the question is, are they enough to carry this team? They've lost a lot of important players over the years to retirement. And that probably was a sign of things not being the best for the Bruins looking forward.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that as much as the Bruins, I'm not sure that they fell apart. And this is me trying to give the Leafs credit. I think the Leafs played like a team that knew that if they played well, they could catch up and beat Boston. They played in that way. They earned the victory. It wasn't just that Boston fell apart. They did some really good stuff to get there. I mean, the overtime goal, if we can start from the end, the overtime goal was a beautiful goal, an excellent goal, right? 100%. So it was one of those things where, it pinballed into the net. Even the tying goal was something that they did with an empty net. That's nothing to poo-poo at. So the Leafs did what they needed to do. And that's what really good teams do. And teams that aren't so good are teams that don't know how to shut down the opposition. And that's what the problem with the Bruins was. They could not shut down the Maple Leafs. And the Maple Leafs did a good job of essentially having their way with the Bruins. It turned into the Leaf game. The first period it was Bruins. And then the second period came, it started to be a saw-off. And then the third period came, and it looked like the Bruins had some life, but then the Leafs snuffed it out. So this was a real workmanlike game for the Maple Leafs, the one that they deserved the victory.
Yeah, and you could start to see the ice tilt in the Maple Leafs' favor. And by the time the puck went down for the third period, it was firmly tilted in the Maple Leafs' favor. So, it was basically a tale of 3 games, like you mentioned. So I'm happy with it. Not happy with what's going to happen to Boston after this, but this is what happens when you build a team that's had success for as long as they had. Eventually, you got to change the tires and fix the suspension and all that sort of fun stuff.
Well, we knew Chris Tanev was injured. We knew he wasn't
Yeah.
coming back, and then we saw the overtime. We saw Nylander looking at his hand, gloveless, and there was concern, I'm sure, in Leaf Nation that, okay, we're losing Tanev, but do we really want to lose Nylander too? I don't think so. Well, it turns out he dodged a bullet there, right?
Oh, 100%. I know that we had been worried about that, especially with him nursing the wrist as it appeared that he was doing. But he did reassure reporters on Friday after morning skate that he's ready to go as the Leafs prepare for the evening matchup against the New York Rangers. When asked if he was dealing with any after effects, he said, "No, I'm fine. I'm fine." He was on his usual spot in the second line alongside Tavares and Pontus Holmberg. Didn't appear to show any signs of discomfort. Berube also reconfirmed that. He says business as usual. He feels good. Something happened in the game. He didn't feel that he could go out there in overtime, but that's all that it was. But he's 100%. It's one of those things where he might have caught a stinger, something that doesn't necessarily affect you long term, but at the moment, and especially with the short cuff gloves that a lot of players wear these days, it's entirely possible that he did get a bit of a ding on the wrist. So.
Whatever it was only a problem at the end of the game. The next day, he was 100%, and that's what's important, especially in the context of Chris Tanev, who unfortunately didn't get a stinger, didn't get something that was only needing the end of the game to become not a problem. They're not saying what it is, but it sounds like it might be a separated shoulder. They're hoping it isn't a collarbone. If it's a collarbone, we're talking months before he can get back. And I don't mean 6. I mean like 2, 8 weeks, whatever it is, to get out of that. And I'm looking here. It's the end of February, end of March, end of April. If you're a Leaf fan, you don't want to hear about the collarbone.
Yeah. Now, it wasn't a bad hit. It wasn't a reckless sort of hit, but it was a heavy hit by John Beecher. Philippe Myers was taking his spot in the rotation on Friday. This is going to be his first game since the start of the Four Nations face-off break. But again, trade speculation has sort of picked up. Not that the Leafs weren't looking to improve by the March 7th deadline, but, Carson Soucy is available, Bowen Byram, Seth Jones, Luke Shen is another possibility that's been bandied about.
Wonder what he would fit in. How he would fit into a Leaf lineup. Oh wait, we've been there.
We tried him a few times before, So, but yeah, OEL, Morgan Riley, and Jake McCabe have played very well recently. Someone's obviously going to have to come in for Tanev, and they're going to need to eat up a lot of penalty kill stuff.
They'll have some options. I mean, it's the perfect timing. Hakanpää is, as far as I know, he was starting to practice with the team. I don't know how close he is to coming in. Philippe Myers is another guy. This is, for me, it's important. And you can't compare Tanev and Morgan Riley. But maybe you can put Morgan Riley in there and lose a little bit on shutdown and gain a little bit on offense. But they do need a shutdown pair. And that's why, you're probably not going to see Morgan Riley over there. You'll probably see OEL probably in that position. And that's why I think it's important that Hakanpää get healthy, because he's pretty good defensively. It would be great for him to get in there and help fill that role. I mean, after he works his way into the lineup, I don't think you can throw him in there, make him the shutdown defenseman his first game back, but he could work towards something like that, because quite frankly, being a shutdown defenseman in the playoffs is a very handy body to have.
Yeah.
And trading for a player to replace Tanev, Aaron, I don't like that idea. There's no need to replace Tanev. Live with the fact that he's not there. They were thinking of getting another defenseman. Stick to the plan. You got a defenseman, somebody that you want in the second pair, maybe, because you're not going to get a first pair defenseman unless you're willing to give up a lot and take on a lot of contract.
Yeah, and the issue that the Leafs are running into at this point here is they do have $3.57 $3.569999 in long-term injured reserve pool space. They also have $1.426 million in current cap space, which means they're not 100% out of options, but there's very, very little wiggle room available for them at this time.
Well, especially if they want to go for another center.
Yeah, and you look at guys like Pacioretty, who's on long-term injured reserve, and you look at other players that are still not quite able to go. Again, Järnkrok and Hakanpää, those are the two guys that you definitely want back. I know Willie was listed as day-to-day earlier today, but he does appear that he's going to be ready to go tonight. But it's a question now of playing musical chairs with the salary cap to try to get the fit that you want and get the room that you need. You have another week until the trade deadline shows up, so you have a little bit of time to work on this. I'm not overly concerned at this point. I think their best option, like you mentioned, would be to suck it up for the meantime until Tanev comes back.
Make the move you're planning to move with him, and the move you're planning when he was in the lineup. Yeah. Go ahead and make that move. If that's what you're going to do, don't let that stop you making that move. And then, and then go from there. The thing about the Leafs right now is that they've got a week before the trade deadline, and also the opportunity to not concern themselves with the cap, because the cap becomes irrelevant in the playoffs. So, working towards that right now is something, getting all the players healthy so that they have the option to join the team. And when the cap isn't an issue, perfect for the long run that the playoffs can be. And that if the Leafs want to get to the, Holy Grail, they're going to need a lot of players, because attrition is the first thing that the first thing you have to concern yourself with in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. And, this again, it all comes down to who's hurt the least at this point, which is never the fun part of the season to get into. But at the same time, you gotta kind of respect that,
Absolutely.
And I know we've spoken about players overtraining before, which seems to lead to more injuries. And I know that we're generally not a fan of the whole maintenance day thing, but it does seem like that does start to come a little more into play these days. So,
well, the question is, what it comes down to, right, Aaron? The player that sits out, does he lose a rhythm that he has while he's in? That's the concern always with those maintenance days. Mm-hmm. But maybe that's why it's important that they get those maintenance days, before that point. Make sure that they don't. The one thing. There's two battles here. Is if you rest a guy, are you making him, because he has to get back into the game mentality, is he in a safe place to play, right, where injuries don't become an issue? But you don't want him to be tired too, because that creates an opportunity for injury. Being tired and not being 100% and not being 100% aware and able to play the game, the physical game that hockey is, and not have yourself in a position where like happened to Tanev, not that it's because he's tired or whatever, but that kind of position where you make a decision maybe that you wouldn't make if you weren't tired, is my point. And I'm not suggesting that Tanev was tired, but there are decisions that you make where you can mitigate injury, but you can't play like you're trying to. That's the whole point. It has to be natural. It has to be physically natural, that you're playing the way you want to play, the way you practice, the way you play, and the way you've always played. So it's going to be interesting. I don't know that. I'm not one of those people that thinks that the Leafs really need to trade for anything. What they really need is they need the players they have to play up to their potential.
No, they definitely do. And I mean, as it currently stands, with Tanev, Connor Dewar, Max Pacioretty, Calle Järnkrok, and Janne Hakanpää injured, you're looking at approximately $11 million worth of guys that are currently sidelined. So, they've currently got Alex Steeves and Marshall Rafai in the press box for them. The question now becomes, how quickly can those guys get into the lineup and be ready to go?
And can they keep them in the lineup so they have a rhythm? Like a guy like Steeves, I'll tell you the other thing is that with the playoffs are a revelation. and it reveals players that maybe we didn't think were that good. You can think of a dozen players in your own mind, Aaron, that it seems when the playoffs come, all of a sudden they play like something else. And who can't remember a Stanley Cup champion that didn't have a player, a young player, a rookie, or a player with no reputation, that for some reason this particular playoff season arrives, and all of a sudden it's like they figured it all out and they get into a rhythm and a wave, and they become a very important part of the team, even though they weren't before. And that's what the Leafs need. They need a couple of players to rise up and play the kind of hockey they haven't played before or haven't had a chance to play. Steves is a candidate for that. Like, if Steve's a guy that can get a goal per 2 games, if he can score, if he can score a handful of goals and be counted on to score those goals, and he has the ability, that can go a long way to winning a playoff series, because we all know the one thing the playoffs reveal, that is no-name goal scorers win important hockey games.
Oh, 100%. It's always that player that you never suspect is the one that's going to have the breakout game and eventually do something huge for you. The other concern I have at this point here is that Joseph Woll is also listed as day-to-day, but that's because he's dealing with an illness. So that's another factor that the Leafs are going to have to take into consideration. I don't think it's going to hold him out. But ideally, if they don't have to use him and if Stolarz can go, that's probably the better bet.
He will be playing against the Rangers.
Yeah, he is going to be starting. I'm reasonably certain.
Absolutely, he'll be starting against the Rangers, and the issue of who will be the starting goaltender in the playoffs is on the cusp of being answered, and by cusp I mean the regular season as it plays out will determine which goaltender they'll go to first, and if they'll even go to the second goaltender. There is this thing where I think you and I have enough experience that we've seen in the playoffs that it's rare that you have alternate goaltenders intended by a team. In other words, a team go in with a plan that we're going to alternate our goaltenders. Boston did that, right? With Ullmark, and they did it, but they went away from that plan like in the first series. They alternated the first few games, and they went, forget it, we're going to pick our goaltender, and we're going to go with that guy.
Yeah, and typically by this point in the season, who your starter is going to be.
Who's the starter for Toronto? Who in your mind is the starter? I would go Stolarz.
Strictly from a statistical point of view, Joseph Woll has 20 wins and a .910 save percentage through 31 games this season. However, Stolarz has a .926 save percentage, which ties him with Connor Hellebuyck for the best amongst NHL goaltenders who played 10 or more games, and he has 12 wins through 20 games. So he may have played fewer games than Joseph Woll, but at this point in the season, statistically speaking, Stolarz is the guy that you're going to want to go with.
And they might start with suggesting alternate. And the one problem with Joseph Woll is that we know he can't play all the time. And unfortunately, we can say the same thing about Stolarz. If we just use the example of this season, we've seen both goaltenders out. We've seen both goaltenders play well. What we haven't seen, we might have seen Woll for a short stretch not play well, for a very short stretch. Stolarz, not so much. But I like Stolarz because of his, I got to say, it's his athleticism, and it's his ability to cover a lot of the net, with the way he plays, the way he plays goal. There's something about him, but that's just me and what I see. I don't know what you think.
Well, when Stolarz is quiet, he's very, very hard to beat. And again, this goes for a lot of goalies too. As long as you don't panic and you center yourself and you stay where you need to be, you're going to be doing decently well. And I mean, because he is starting here, it's his third start since the Four Nations faceoff break concluded last week. He's appeared in 2 of Toronto's 3 games after returning, allowing 7 goals on 71 shots against the Canes and the Boston Bruins. That to me speaks volumes as to his level of preparedness. I think he's ready to go. I think if you have the opportunity to rest up Wall and make sure that he's 100% healthy, you take that opportunity. I think it'd be really funny if they started Murray for the first game of the playoffs, but that's just me just wanting chaos. That's make of that what you will.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Stolar's great goaltender. And it doesn't matter. Wall or him, it doesn't matter. They're two really good goaltenders. And as long as the Leafs protect them by playing a decent defensive style, a team that now has adopted the idea that blocking shots is a good thing. They have they have the best shot blocker in the league on their defense. Not right now, he's injured, but he is what he is. Let's take a break from the Maple Leafs and the National Hockey. Let's go over to the Canadian Football League and let's talk about the CFL's Montreal Alouettes, and they extended somebody.
Yeah, they've extended defensive lineman Mustafa Johnson through 2026. He was already under contract for the 2025 season. He had 35 defensive tackles, 6 sacks, 1 block kicked, and 4 knockdowns in 15 games last season. Originally from Aurora, Colorado, he actually joined the Owls in 2022, and he established himself as a fixture in the Owls defense as one of the premier defensive linemen in the CFL. In 40 career games in the CFL so far, he's registered 96 tackles, 15 quarterback sacks, and 1 touchdown. He also suited up in 5 playoff games for the Owls, including their Grey Cup win over Winnipeg in 2023. So he's proven himself to be an integral part of their defense. He was also named to the East Division All-CFL team back in 2023 after he finished with 47 tackles and 7 sacks in 18 games. Dude has a very unique ability to cut through the line and get to the quarterback quickly.
Absolutely. Speak to me about Armani Watts and the Toronto Argonauts.
Well, they've signed him. He originally played with the Indianapolis Colts, in 2022 before an injury cut his season short in the preseason. Now, he was originally drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs in the 4th round of the 2018 draft. He played 53 games with the Chiefs, tallying 58 tackles and 1 fumble recovery while seeing action in 9 playoff games, including 2 Super Bowls and winning one in 2019. It's one of those players where he's got experience in a different league and reasonably certain he can make it translate, just because he's proved himself to be highly adaptable. So we'll see how well he fits in.
Absolutely. They signed defensive back Yannon Liddell, I guess.
Yeah, and in signing Nunn Liddell, they've getting a player who has some experience with the Houston Roughnecks of the UFL. He played at Kentucky State in 2022. Also played at Bowling Green. So this is one of those guys where they've seen some of his play. They've apparently taken a shine to him and seen something that they like. So this is the part of the season where you can bring players on without worrying too much about it and see where they fit in.
Absolutely, and they hope that he fits in well. Justin Redd, offensive lineman, signed.
Yeah, another individual that they got who played for the Houston Roughnecks of the UFL after playing for the Houston Gamblers of the USFL in 2023. He originally played collegiately at East Carolina University, starting 13 games for the Pirates. Also played 34 games across 4 years at Norfolk State, and was named Conference Offensive Lineman of the Year in 2021. Now, at the same time that they've actually signed him, they've also released Ife Onyemanam and Stefan East. So both of those are out, while they brought in Justin Redd and Jinan Liddell and Armani Watts.
Ticats make a signing?
Yeah, they've signed Nicholas Millsap. Now, Millsap spent 4 seasons at Delta State after transferring from Lake Erie College. He's an offensive lineman. He's 6'8", 325 pounds. So this is a big boy that the Ticats are bringing in here. I'm guessing they're looking for him to punch holes because that dude is absolutely huge.
Size matters. In this case, especially. Let's talk about the Lions and them and Christian Matt coming to terms.
Yeah, they've hired him as their running back coach. Originally from Saint-Hubert, he joins the staff 3 months following his retirement as a player with the Montreal Alouettes, where he served as a longtime anchor on the offensive line. Buck Pierce says that his success as a player, combined with his extensive knowledge of the running game, will go a long way in elevating our offense. Originally selected 7th overall by the Alouettes in the 2010 CFL draft, he suited up in 190 regular season games, good for 8th on the team's all-time list over the next 14 seasons. Won Grey Cups in 2010 and 2023, and was a 2-time East Division All-CFL player in 2019 and 2021. So, he's going to be joining Mike Benavidez, Corey McDermott, and Kevin Burgoyne. So we'll see how well he fits in there. Certainly, it's not going to hurt. He may be able to actually help elevate their game. So looking forward to seeing what he does with their offense.
Absolutely. And, of course, why don't we talk about the PWHL? We don't spend enough time talking about them, and let's talk about Montreal.
Marie-Philippe Poulin scored the winning goal and added an assist to lead Montreal to a 3-1 victory over Toronto at Place Bell on Tuesday. That win snaps the Victoire's 2-game losing streak and ends the Scepter's 6-game winning streak and a 10-game point streak that Toronto had. Now, Toronto got on the board first with their first shot on goal, while the Victoire tied the game about 4 minutes into the second period. Jennifer Gardner got that on a setup for Poulin and Laura Stacy. And with just under 5 minutes left in the second, Poulin got the game winner. Stacy sealed the victory with an empty net in the game's final minute. And Renee Desbiens helped her team in the game with a 24-save performance, getting her 10th win of the season, now tied for the league lead. Kristen Campbell stopped 21 shots in her third straight start for the Scepters. So Toronto, after having a disastrous start to the season, is now sitting back in second place and looking very, very good at the time, for all of the effort that they put in. They've got 32 points. They're 2 points up on the Boston Fleet and 3 points up on the Minnesota Frost.
Let's go over to Ottawa, who beat the Sirens.
Yeah, Gabby Hughes had a 3-point performance, added the game winner in overtime to lift the Charge to a 5-4 victory over the New York Sirens at TD Place. This gives the Charge 10 points in their last 5 games and a 5-point lead on the Sirens, who have now dropped their 8th straight game. This is not looking well for New York. They had a promising start, but they're now 4-3-4-9 with 22 points after 20 games played. So they're not doing as well as they could be, especially for the lineup that they have. I understand that there's some frustration there, but they battled back to get a goal to tie the game, but unfortunately weren't able to seal the deal.
Let's move over to F1 and let's talk about 2 pit stops for Monaco that were called into question.
Yeah, so a lot of the times in Monaco, there's a lot of complaints because it basically just seems like a parade. Because of the fact that the cars have been getting wider and longer every year, there seem to be less and less overtaking. The past few races in particular have basically been decided by grid positions from Saturday qualifying. Last year, there was a little bit of interest after some leadership changes in the first lap, but they ended up going with a standing restart where Charles Leclerc took the victory without having to stop again to get different tires. So the whole idea behind putting in mandatory pit stops or competition pit stops is an attempt to make sure that there's a little more competition and there's the chance for overtaking, so that the guy that starts on the pole doesn't end in first place, because nobody likes to see a parade.
No. And I got to tell you, they're not having parades in that American version of race cars. They're getting a little testy. Let's go back to hockey. We'll start with the Montreal Canadiens. Did you see that goal Caulfield scored?
Dude, you know what? He tucked it between his own legs to get around super rookie Macklin Celebrini. You know what? There's a reason why Cole Caulfield leads the Canadiens with 28 goals. Now, It also helped that Nick Suzuki had 2 first-period goals, and Alex Newhook had his first goal since February 4th. Sam Montembeau also stopped 22 shots for his 3rd win in a row. Fabian Zetterlund, Nico Sturm, and Will Smith scored for San Jose. They are currently last in the NHL and have lost 7 straight in 13 of their last 14 games. It's a tough situation for them to be in, man. I do not envy the Sharks at all at this point in the season.
How about the Sens and the Jets?
Well, the Jets beat the Sens and managed to turn their streak up to 11. Connor Hellebuck made 24 saves. This is the new record for them, So this is absolutely fantastic news if you're a Winnipeg Jets fan. They have improved to 36-7-2. Hellebuck's improved, to 36-7-2. The Jets are 42-14-3 overall and 19-9-0 on the road. Cole Perfetti and Mason Appleton opened the scoring for the Jets. Kyle Connor added his 31st goal of the season, and Mark Scheifele had an empty netter for his 33rd, and Scheifele also had assists. Thomas Chabot was the sole bright light for Ottawa. Linus Ullmark stopped 36 of 40, and unfortunately the Senators have now lost 5 straight.
That's tough for them. Let's talk about the Panthers beating the Oilers. The Oilers can't seem to find a way to win after the break.
No, and I'm puzzled because some of their players had a fantastic Four Nations faceoff. Nate Schmidt, Carter Verhaeghe had 3rd-period goals. Anton Lundell had a goal and 2 assists. Uvis Balinskis also scored for Florida. And again, as we mentioned in the first period, because of that, they've actually jumped over Toronto. Leon Draisaitl had his 44th goal for the Oilers. They also got goals from Brent Kulak and Zach Hyman. This is Edmonton's first time on the Panthers ice since June 24th, when Florida beat the Oilers 2-1 in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. Now, the Panthers did win the club's first meeting earlier this season, beating the Oilers 6-5 in Edmonton. This is a tough situation. For all intents and purposes, the Oilers, I think, could have won this game easily, but unfortunately, it looks like the hockey gods had other plans for them. Both teams had 12 players on the ice Thursday from the lineups that they actually used in Game 7 of the finals last year. So consistency is there, but unfortunately, the results just aren't there for Edmonton.
Edmonton's a team that has something to prove. They've been a team that, for some reason, a really good team that goes into stretches where they don't play well at all. Last year, they started the season the worst team in the league the first month. Something happened. They're looking for that same thing to happen again, but they can't. I don't think they're going to do it with a change of coach. I don't think they're going to drop their coach that brought them to the Stanley Cup final.
I don't think they have that opportunity this time, and that sort of magic trick only works once. So, we're going to have to see how they manage to get themselves through it this time.
Vasilevsky, Tampa Bay Lightning beat the Flames. My goodness, this Flames team is struggling to make the playoffs. They're giving it a good shot. Them in Vancouver.
Yeah, Tampa Bay is 8-0-1 in the past 9 games, and Calgary, on the flip side of everything, they're 4-5-1 in their last 10. They have not been having a good time of it at all. Excuse me. The Tampa Bay Lightning themselves are 8-1-1 and on a 7-game win streak. When that sort of thing happens, look at it this way. Nazem Kadri's 7-game scoring streak came to an end. Anthony Cirelli tied a career high with 45 points. Vasilevsky's 11-0-1 in his past 12 starts. Blake Coleman, who won cups with Tampa Bay in 2020 and 2021, now with the Flames, has appeared in his 600th career game. I hate to say that it hinges on missed opportunities, but the Flames were on a power play in the opening minutes of the second period, down by a goal, when Jonathan Huberdeau had a rebound chance that Andrei Vasilevsky stretched out to deny. I don't know if that completely took the wind out of their sails, but it certainly didn't help. Both teams are going to be playing on Saturday night. Calgary is at Florida, and Tampa Bay is at Washington. So we'll have to see if either of their fortunes change.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the Canucks.
So Troy Terry and Ryan Strome are at it again. So are the Anaheim Ducks. Get this. Sorry. There we go. The Anaheim Ducks are 7-2-1 in their past 10 games with a it's one of those, I didn't expect them to be where they are. I thought they'd be a little bit higher. Those orange uniforms are a bit of an eyesore, but they're not that far out of a wild card spot. They're currently 6 points behind the Vancouver Canucks for that sort of thing. And the Canucks, I'm not sure what's going on with them, but they're not doing well. Frank Vetrano, Kutagoche, and Ryan Strome scored in the second period. Jackson Lacombe got a 4-on-4 goal late in the third for Anaheim, and Troy Terry got the empty netter to wrap up the Ducks' 8th win in 11 games. Dostal made 22 saves in the Ducks' first home game in 3.5 weeks. Pia Suter and Tyler Myers scored in the first period for the Canucks. Unfortunately, they then allowed 5 unanswered goals, and Artur Silovs only stopped 20 shots. That's a problem.
It's a big problem. I changed the Leaf background, but we'll do the opposite and talk about the Leafs. And I gotta say, the one thing that this year's team has done, I know that they've gone on losing streaks, but there's something about the losing streaks that they've gone on this year. They're in the middle of a winning streak, so maybe people don't remember what it was like when the Leafs were in a losing streak. They were losing, but they didn't look horrible. I think this is probably the one thing I'll say about the coach they have right now is that the team has probably played this season more consistently than they have in any of the other seasons that they had, going right back to Mr. Detroit. They've done a great job of being consistent. And I think, isn't that the most important thing? If you're a coach, it's about the process, and it's about playing in a way that leads to you playing consistent.
Oh yeah, I know, and that's one of the things that a lot of people have been harping on when it comes to the Maple Leafs is their up and down style of play. And by up and down, I don't mean north and south. I mean like a roller coaster. The one thing that they've managed to try to minimize this season is those long streaks where they don't play well and lose a ton of games. That I think has been thanks to Berube's coaching style and the system that he's trying to get them to adopt.
And in fairness, to the other coaches, the maturity of the players that he has.
No, for sure. The fact that all of these players are now approaching unrestricted free agency and have been with the Leafs for as long as they have, it's one of those things where you kind of have to grow up at some point, and it looks like we're finally seeing that from the Maple Leafs.
Absolutely. I guess talking about Matthews, I'm still waiting for him to break out. I mean, I wish I knew what the injury was. I wish I knew it was something that affects his scoring. I wish I knew, because I'm really not sure why he's having difficulty scoring at a level that he's accustomed to. I don't know, Aaron. All I see in his game that I don't see him being in the position as often as he used to be, where it's a quick shot into the net like a wrister, right? Because he's not a slapper, right? He's not a guy who slaps the puck.
No, I mean, typically his shots are with a backswing to the tops of his knees, or a quick wrister, or a tip in. The problem that we're running into here is I don't know if other teams have keyed on how to actually shut him down. But in this first year of his $13.25 million contract, after having the season that he did last year, the only thing that this could potentially be called is a bit of a disappointment. And I don't know if it's carryover from a nagging wrist injury. We don't know if he's got some other sort of illness. Certainly, the fact that he was overseas being treated for previous injuries is not something that fills you with a lot of confidence.
No,
So,
and the thing is that when we watch him play, he doesn't look as dangerous as he's been in the past. Now, is that because of what you said, that teams are figuring out how to defend against him? Is that all it is? Is that what's going on? We know that Marner's having a really good year, and he's having a real good year when it comes to assists, but they don't seem to be helping Matthews as much as they used to.
I know that we've spoken before about this, and I know that we've always joked about the fact that everything seems to run through Matthews. Based on the season that Mitch has been having lately, it does appear that they're actually trying to distribute it a little bit more as opposed to strictly running it through Austin. He is sitting on 21 goals and 27 assists for 48 points so far this season. So, it's not like he's been starved for attention. It's just he's not quite piling them up the way that he used to. And again, it's probably a function of them not strictly going through him. Mitch, on the other hand, sitting at 18 goals and 55 assists for 73 points, is making things really difficult because he's in the sixth year of his contract and he's due for renewal of that $10.903 million deal. There's a lot of difficult decisions that are going to have to be made coming up, and I don't envy the Maple Leafs for any of those.
And I guess really what we're talking about here is Matthews is trying to, I don't think there's any question about this, change his game, create a type of game that I think he feels is better in the playoffs. And in other words, he's playing a style that will afford him a better result in the playoffs, and the opportunities to score, while he hasn't really had a lot of really dangerous opportunities, still had a few, and it's just a question of him, and I gotta say, I don't mean to go back to the Four Nations, but the Four Nations was that game, and that loss was a perfect example of why Matthews, I think, will and is gravitating towards understanding that stopping people from scoring is almost as important as scoring. And the game can end on somebody else's stick, and you can't let them do that. You can't give them a chance to do that. So that's the lesson. Once he gets really good at the defensive part of the game, then he can cheat a little more, and do stuff. That's what I'm looking forward to from him is getting those opportunities to score, the kind that Marner's been getting and succeeding in.
I do genuinely appreciate the fact that Austin is trying to change his game to become more of a 200-foot player.
He's trying to earn that C, right?
Oh, 100%. And God bless him for that. But at the same time, we didn't sign you to be a Selke winner or a
Rocket
defensive
Richard.
stalwart. We signed you to win the Rocket every year. That was the whole reason why we gave you $13.25 million for that 69-goal season.
Well, because goal scorers are harder to find.
Yep.
Defensive specialists are everywhere.
Once you've lost that step, you've got to make sure that you're the defensive specialist. And I don't think that he has. He's only 27 years old. You got to do something.
Well, we're understanding, though, that speed isn't his thing. It's his strength on the puck, right? His physical ability to avoid giving up the puck. That's his biggest contribution as a player today, as a forward. Sorry, and that's his defensive acumen is something that he can add to it. But when he does something like that, there has to be scoring scored elsewhere, and Marner's doing it. Nylander's doing it. Even Tavares is doing it. They're hoping McMahon, Robertson, these guys score at a better rate so that, I talk about this all the time, and it was mentioned on the broadcast that, and I firmly believe this, and that is that in the playoffs, the teams that win aren't necessarily the teams that have the best players, because a lot of times the best players play at par. The two number one lines play against each other. Nobody gets anything. You get a saw-offs. That's why I always say the fourth line, if they can chip in a goal and keep the other side blank, that makes a big contribution. And then the closer you get to the first line, third and second line, those two lines, if they can do the same thing, if they can be better than the second, third lines of the other team. So at the end of the day, you can't throw the game away when you're the number one guy. That's why I think Matthews is thinking defense, because, he understands that not scoring, not letting the opposition score, takes a lot of pressure off you needing to score. And then when you do, you're creating a better byproduct of your ability to score.
No, for sure. I think a lot of the issues that the Leafs are running into this point, as well, is the fact that they've committed 72.5% of their cap to 13 forwards. And I'm not talking about just the big guys up there. We're talking about almost 3/4 is tied up in 13 players. You've got your defense languishing.
That's not counting the goaltenders, and it's not counting the defense.
Yeah, that's 26.1% of the cap goes to defensemen, and 3.7% of your cap goes to your two goaltenders. They buried Matt Benning. That's 0.1% of their cap. The fact that the Leafs are so top heavy in this regard, I think, is also detrimental, because they have a lot of guys that they can't necessarily move, and they've got a lot of guys who, if they aren't performing well, you kind of have to keep them in the lineup, because that's what the money's for.
I would love to convince the Players Association to get rid of the no trade.
No trade and no movement clauses are so frustrating, but I can understand why the players want them in.
They deserve to argue over that, to fight for it.
But yeah,
like a selfish hockey fan says, damn no trade clause. It's bad enough that you can't trade a contract. There's enough of those. In fact, Chicago has a defenseman that a lot of teams would take, but not for $9.5 million a year.
Yeah, that sometimes you get a real boat anchor of a contract, and there's really not a lot that you can do about that.
No,
I mean, good on the players for getting their money. Don't get me wrong. Good on the players for getting their money. They should get their bag. But there has to be some sort of wiggle room. There has to be something that can be done to try to, mitigate that sort of thing. I mean, when you look at Seth Jones getting 9.5 and essentially trying to pull a Vince Carter and play himself off of the Chicago Blackhawks, like the next player behind him is Alex Vlasic on the defense, and he's only making 4.6. And even then, they've tied up 31.8% of their cap, for 7 defensemen, and 44.7% of their cap for 14 forwards. The boat anchor that they're looking at is Laurent Brossoit, Peter Mrazek, and Arvid Soderblom, who are 9.7% of their cap as 3 goalies. So I'm not sure where they go from here. I'm not sure what happened with their capologist to screw everything up that badly. But they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pending free agents coming. So that gives them a little more wiggle room.
They have a lot of draft picks, Aaron. If they can jettison players and contracts, there's the opportunity. I don't know why teams are afraid to do it. Just put the guy. Like if I'm Chicago, I just put him up there. Anybody want him, you can have him. You don't have to give us a thing. Just take him.
Yeah,
because that's what it comes down to, is his contract. Would a team even pick him up if does any team of any kind of quality want to care? Do they have $9 million to fit into their cap space?
I mean, I can think of some, but none of them are contenders.
Right. That's the issue, right? So even it comes down to Chicago has to eat, and they're going to have to eat at least a third. And they're not going to eat a third of the salary and not get something extra for that, right?
Guaranteed.
Right. So, the asset thing, there's a lot of noise. The Leafs are going to do something. I talked a little bit about if they need a defenseman, they don't need one to replace Tanev. They need one that they figure they need for the playoffs, whoever that is. And the same thing's true for, a third line center. Do you think they'll pull those 2 trades, Aaron?
I'd like to see them try to pull something like that. But, and again,
is that what you go for, a defenseman or a third line center?
I would probably at this point go with 2 forwards. I would.
Would they be centers or?
Yes, because you don't want Max Domi playing center. David Kampf is great at shutdown, but he's where offense goes to die.
Funny, in the last World Cup, he was incredible. He was an offensive dynamo.
I just, it's one of those things where you look at their third and fourth line centers, David Kampf and Max Domi, behind Austin Matthews and John Tavares, and you think there's got to be somebody better that we can find. There's got to be. I don't know where they're going to find them because I'm not smart like that, but I do know, this is the current situation that they're in. They need to bolster that because you need to put Domi back on the wing. Maybe move him up with Tavares. I don't know if Holmberg's really all that good at playing center. That's another issue that you've got there. Ryan Reeves, I love the guy. I just don't know if in today's NHL and with this particular team, he has a place.
It's going to be interesting. Goaltending, they look pretty solid. Defense, they've got a couple of really good defensemen, and it would really, I think, if their defenseman Riley could find his offensive ability, could work on his shot if he can at this late in his career, where it finds a way through the massive amount of legs and stuff. In other words, if he becomes a key member of the power play, they won't need to trade anybody. If they have the Riley that had a great year, if you remember when he got his 20 goals, I think it was that year. If he was that defenseman again, the Leafs wouldn't need to trade for anybody at all.
Yeah, that particular season where he had 72 points back in 2018, 2019. My God, was it really 7 years ago? Yeah, we needed him to find that particular touch again because 20 points and 52 assists is definitely something that we could use. He came close in his contract year, 2021, 2022, when he had 10 goals and 58 assists for 68 points. But again, it's one of those
that's the kind of guy they need.
Yeah,
that's the guy they need on defense. That's the missing quality. They don't have an offensive defenseman.
No,
they're great defensemen are shutdown guys. They're shutdown guys. They don't have a guy from the point who has a really good shot that they can even have him on the ice during a power play.
And the problem is when the guys up front go dry, and that happens far more frequently than most Leaf fans would like to admit. When those guys up front go dry, you need somebody to pick up the slack, and that's got to be the defenseman. And right now, they're not really getting it from anybody.
We'll find out in the Rangers tonight, a team that's kind of rebuilding half stride, right? They're looking for a playoff spot. The Leafs are going to be playing a pretty hungry team, and I think a fairly angry team too. So it's going to be interesting. The Leafs better be ready when that first puck gets dropped.
Oh, most definitely. I'll be watching with great interest.
Absolutely. Aaron, thanks for doing this, buddy.
Always a pleasure, Frank.
Much appreciated. Thanks for watching, everybody. This has been Candid Frank Live, Maple Leaf NHL Talk. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next Friday, 6 o'clock. Thanks for watching. For Aaron William Freeland, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci.